Cool. Nishant, you mentioned that you didn't have too much experience with serverless. Did you mean the serverless framework in particular, or were you talking about just like serverless on AWS in general?
Serverless framework and also a few services in AWS like Cognito. But yeah, I read the documents and it's easy. It's not that difficult.
Cool. So serverless framework is really just an abstraction layer over top of CloudFormation. If you're not familiar with that, it just allows you to write your infrastructure as code and make it all kind of reusable and easy to stand up additional stacks, which is what makes it easy for us to stand up our development environments here. So starting on this first line here, you can see that we've got this serverless service suffix, and that's just coming from our .env file here. And that's because we're using the single developer AWS account to deploy all of our individual stacks. Now we could have our own AWS accounts and then this wouldn't be an issue. This is also being used for pull requests. When you send a pull request, it actually creates a sandbox environment and it uses the, I believe it's the PRID as the suffix here. So this is all pretty standard, nothing interesting here. We're using a whole heap of plugins, which is one of these great things about CloudFormation over, that serverless framework has over CloudFormation. It allows you, it provides plenty of hooks to do things. You can check these out if you're interested to find out what they do. But for now, I think it's enough to just know that they're doing things, kind of extending the serverless framework here. And you'll see that we've got some certain values in here somewhere, like perhaps custom domain, for example, is configuring the serverless domain manager, for example. And there are a bunch of different values in here. So the way that this is configured is it's split into different stages. We've got development, staging, and production are our three very simple pipeline workflow stages. So development is the main one that we're interested in. Just a quick side quest onto the CI is when you merge into master, it kicks off it runs tests, it deploys to staging, and then it will run some actual, for example, Cypress end-to-end tests against staging. We don't currently have that, but Uday, you mentioned that you were interested in setting that up. So it'll run the Cypress tests against staging. If all of that works, it'll cut a release and publish a GitHub release with all of the release artifacts. There's then another GitHub action that is listening for new releases, and it picks that up and deploys that bundle to production. But development is one that we're mostly interested in here. So env AWS profile is coming from your credentials file, which Uday, you noticed that the SSO credentials weren't enough there. It works for however long, then they expire because they're just short-lived credentials. But you were able to get past that by signing to the console, creating some more permanent credentials and sticking those into your credentials files. Is that right? You're past that blocker now? I believe you are. Yeah, cool. So some other things that we've got here in development, log retention is just set to a single day. We don't really want to keep those around for longer. In areas like staging, it's 3 days, production, for 14 days. So we can actually got some time to dive into those things. We're not, let's see, what's supposed to go on here in Amplify? This is some custom domain stuff that we haven't set up yet, but we will be able to configure Amplify with custom domains. Anyway, so we're going to ignore that. API, we're just telling it that we're not using a custom domain for now. And then for notification emails, again, this is coming from our .env. So you can just set this to your personal email if you want to. It's probably unlikely that you'll be receiving too many alarms in the development environment though. In our staging and production, most importantly production, we'll have to create some additional emails here and get those being sent out. In the meantime, I don't think we have too many alarms from the get-go anyway. So it picks up, it determines what stage you're in. And again, you'll mostly be running in the development stage. And then it uses these variables all over the place. So for domain name, it's checking, the stage that we're in and then checking the domain name. So that's custom domains being set up, some serverless offline stuff, which helps you run the application locally. Amplify is actually a serverless plugin that I wrote. So Amplify does have, CI/CD, but it's not very good in terms of pipeline. It would allow you to have like a branch called staging. You can merge into staging and that'll get picked up and deployed. And then you can merge it into master to deploy it to master. I don't really like having those stages. So we're doing manual deployments or what they're calling manual deployments, but it is happening automatically in CI/CD. So this is just kind of helps you with setting up some Amplify stuff using serverless framework here. If we look at this, because we are using Next, where is that? Oh, I guess, yes. So this is the Next is sticking into this out. So it's just telling Amplify to deploy the package that's in the out directory here after it runs our build step. It's got a bunch of environment variables there also. We've got some alerts. We've got some dashboard stuff going on. Termination protection. This is just saying on staging and production, like don't delete these stacks unless we actually turn this off. So just a bit of a safeguard. We've got some DynamoDB. This is DynamoDB local. So it allows you to run a local emulator of DynamoDB for development purposes. The app sync stuff is the area that Benoit set up for us, and I'm not too familiar with that yet. So that's something that we need to get more insights into. And Nishant, I believe that you'll be helping us there. And so this here is another thing that Benoit did was he set up some of these. He's split out the serverless template into some additional files. So we're actually defining our functions over in templates functions. Currently, we've just got a get disease handler. The auto confirm user handler is just a Cognito hook, as is post auth n. So Cognito wants you to kind of verify your email, which is fine, but we're skipping that and we're just automatically verifying. Post auth n is saying when they log in, run this Lambda function. And the idea here is that this will check if the user exists in our DynamoDB table, and if not, it'll insert a record there for them. Let me stop and just see if you have any questions at this point.
I'm curious to know how exactly this is going to work in my local machine, because from what I understand, all the resources are going to be on AWS.
Yeah, great question. So this is definitely Sanath knows. This is one of the challenges with serverless, right? Is the development experience just really isn't there. And it's not necessarily serverless. I think it's just like managed services in general, right? So there, it does kind of, serverless framework does a great job. SAM does a great job of providing some local emulators. So you can, roll your own wrappers that kind of emulate a Lambda environment. But that's what this serverless offline plugin does for you. It basically inspects your serverless framework, it identifies all of these, and it spins up endpoints for you, and it kind of runs a local API. The more difficult one is DynamoDB. It's using, I forget under the cover, I think it's local Dynamo or something like that. DynamoDB local, yeah. So it's using that under the covers. And so there are a bunch of these kind of local emulation things. There are two camps in this development environment. There are the people that are more interested in, hey, just deploy everything to AWS and develop against the actual resources, which you can totally do because you have your own development environment in this dev account. And it's your own stack, like, so you don't have to worry about, someone else messing with it. And I really like that. Then there's the camp that favors more of that local emulation. You can do either one, whichever one you prefer. For me, I feel like most resources rarely change. The thing that changes the most are the function logic. So if you can get local Lambda running and then use everything else as the online resource as it exists in AWS, that's my kind of happy middle ground there. I run my UI locally, of course. That doesn't make any sense to run that on AWS. You've got your own browser, that's all you need. And then running the Lambda functions also locally. It gets a little bit tricky when you've got certain things like SQS or things triggering Lambda functions. That's where it gets really tricky. But when it's just like an API, and in our case, we're using AppSync, so you can stand that up. So in that case, it's really a matter of run your local UI, run your local AppSync hooked up with your local functions. You've got a very fast development cycle there. I kind of prefer to hit actual DynamoDB and actual other resources, but that's totally up to you. This is here if you want to use that also.
Are there any specific commands to spin this up locally? Could you show how that works?
Yeah, so I had this, I actually stripped out DynamoDB local from my starter, and I think Benoit was the one that added this back in. So we do have some commands. So start API is going to run SLS offline cloud site. I believe what that does, I think from memory, it's picking up the data out of the stack outputs here, and it kind of injects them as environment variables. So there's start API, there's start UI, which just runs npm start, very simple. You can do that yourself. And then there's also this other one, start UI offline, which does the exact same thing, but it also sets this environment variable for you. And the idea here is that this is the endpoint. So instead of using the live versions deployed to AWS, if you are running it locally, then you can just tell it, hey, it's running on this local host on this port. I think those are the two main ones there. I don't know. I think that there is a command for setting up the DynamoDB local. It's like SLS DynamoDB or something like that. But you can check out the docs. The docs, if you just check that out, that should be able to get you up and running very quickly. Though just with caveat that, there are some limitations there that the local emulator can't really do, but it does do a really good job. Any other questions at this point?
Yeah, just one question. There's something called as functions.webpack.config, right?
Sorry, what was that?
The functions.webpack.config.js file. Where we are
yes.
importing. So we are using the default serverless Webpack. So do we have a config anywhere, or are we using just a default thing?
Well, this is the config here. Serverless Webpack is just giving you some hooks into like the serverless stuff that's running. So it identifies the entries. I believe this is set up based on this. So I think that all of these are like entries. And then it gives you an is local. And that's really all that we're doing with that. Other than that, we're just, because this is just packaging up our Lambda functions, so it doesn't have to have all of that crazy stuff that the UI needs, for example, where there's all of these crazy loaders. If there is something you need, absolutely go ahead and customize this as needed. I'm not sure what the next stuff looks like now, like if we have our own custom web pack over here, or if we just use some, it looks like we don't have anything like that. I guess we're just using the custom, the default, whatever Next comes with. Does that answer your question?
So yeah, so if I want to add like any specific chunking or any modules, right? So I would have to add it in packages, or I can go and edit it over this config.js.
Sorry, what kind of modules? Are you talking about like NPM packages in general?
If I want to like split the chunks, just say like if I want to
I
split
see.
it into multiple chunks, so I would
Yeah,
have
right.
to-
Yeah, you do it here.
Okay.
Again, I don't think that's really something that we need. I'm not aware of, maybe that was just an example you were throwing out, but I don't know if there's any benefits to chunking when we're just building against the node environment here.
But Brett, so this Webpack config is only for the backend Lambda functions, right?
That's right.
For the front end UI, it's got its separate next config.
Yes, that's right.
And I don't know if Next uses Webpack. Maybe they do.
Yeah, I'm assuming underneath they do. I'm not sure where you go to configure it. Okay. Any other questions?
So I think Next has a config called next.config.js where they configure their Webpack. Can you search next.config.js? We might need to create it if we want to
I
have.
see. Maybe out of the box, you don't need it if you're just using default
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, anyway, yeah. So if you wanted to do that stuff, yes, that would be. I'm not deep into Next, but yeah, whatever you need, then feel free to go ahead and customize that config.
Sure.
So if we step over now into GraphQL, and again, this is the area that I'm not too familiar with, and it's it's called GraphQL, but it's AppSync as well on top here. So we're telling it that we're using Cognito user pools as our authentication type. Cognito is one of those services. It's kind of difficult, especially because there's a lot of things actually called Cognito, but mostly it's like you're talking about Cognito identity pools, and then there's Cognito user pools. And so usually you use both of them in conjunction. So you'd be able to set up an identity pool and say when someone is authorized, then they have access to these resources. So in our situation, we would be able to say, they have access to the AppSync endpoint. And then you've got user pools, which is you sign up with your email and your password and you log in with that. So it's got user management, and then it connects it and says, hey, you've got access to this identity pool, authorization state, and whatever is allowed there. Maybe identity pools don't even come into the picture. This just mentions user pools. So we'll find that out, I guess, as we go. So now, unless you've got some experience there with AppSync, and you know how to Cognito stuff.
We can have someone help us out if you need. Like Benoit could at least answer questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way that Benoit has set up a lot of this, I believe that the API endpoints are really they just go VDL transform and then direct to DynamoDB. Looks like we've got this one goes to the Lambda function, I assume, but I think, yeah, right. So these ones here, there are some other ones that just go direct to DynamoDB, and it's doing some VDL transform, I believe. I don't know where those transforms are defined, but it's basically going, it's
VTL.
Right, VTL. VDL is a totally different thing that I'm working on. So VTL and, oh yes, so here we go. So it's just going direct to Dynamo instead of doing any logic inside of a Lambda function. The main, I mean, I had a few questions there. Benoit had some answers. The main one I'm now concerned with, though, is since we have authentication type using Cognito, how do we limit this so that it's, we're making sure that only you can read and write to, your programs and projects and things like that. And I know that there are certain things you can do with DynamoDB that kind of matches up the sub ID that comes from Cognito and checking that, making sure that, the prefix matches that. I think that's not super flexible. So even though, direct app sync to DynamoDB is, really cool, there's that kind of no code feeling there. I think that if we start to hit some issues, especially around authentication, that we will just have to add in some Lambda functions there to do that auth logic for us.
I read the documentation of Cognito, and what you just said is possible with Incognito. So when you integrate Cognito with AppSync, all you have to do is just wire up a directive to the GraphQL schema, and that lets you add some rules. And that with that, you only the users who have created the resources will be able to edit or manipulate the records for that. So if only I can make changes to my profile, not anyone else, and that is taken and that is identified from, I think, the JWT token, and when it is decrypted, the username or whatever the owner property that we want to bind to that request, it basically authenticates in that way and lets only the owner access and manipulate the resource.
Yeah, right. And that's, I think what you're talking about is what I was talking about with the whole sub ID thing, and that which just comes out of the JWT token. I think that does force you to structure your data in a certain way, perhaps. But let's try that first. And if we can, I mean, that would be great if we can just use VTL, no Lambda. But if it's too much of a pain, then let's definitely just shift and use Lambda.
Sounds good.
So let's see. We probably don't need to go too deep into the UI stuff. This is mostly just a next starter. Trying to think like what is specific. You were asking about tests, for example, and if you just search for test files, you can see that we've got a whole heap of tests for existing components. So they're available, they're inline, so they're direct with where the component lives.
Any reason why we named them as TSX? Because I wasn't able to find much TypeScript in any of the things.
Yeah, it looks like we're using TypeScript.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe some components we're using more TypeScript than others, which just happens. I'm trying to think of anything that is specific. So this is the whole sign-in flow here, which is, we definitely, this is kind of a top priority for us to finalize. There must be. No. I'll have to pull back in some of my work that kind of brings it together, where you've got, it's bringing together the variables, and I think they're coming mostly from stack outputs. And it gives you access to those things, and it sets up the API, and it sets up some of the Cognito stuff for you, checking if you're authenticated or not. So let me have a look, and I can at least point you to some resources to bring that back up to date, so that we've got that communication between the front end and the back end. But right now it looks like it's really just straight next, and there's nothing that is talking with our serverless or AWS backend. So we do have some schemas, Sanath. I believe we're still waiting on the kind of final data model here. Is that right?
That's right. I will take it up and I will deliver the data model by tomorrow. I have some time.
Cool. So you can see that the one resolver that we have it's just a hello world basically. But we would need to connect that to DynamoDB if we needed that. So this is where the VTL exists, is in the mapping templates here. And I guess that links back to the GraphQL over here somehow. Okay, yeah, so it's in these mutations here. What's here is just, this is the very simple Cognito hooks that I mentioned before. So the resources here are serverless framework gives you an escape hatch, so you can go in and write just vanilla CloudFormation that gets injected at the end there as well. So there are a bunch of other, and this is where Cognito user pool exists and all of this fun stuff. So whoever ends up integrating Cognito and AppSync, you'll probably have to do some stuff here. If it's not using identity pool, then we can rip out those resources. But they do exist. Like we do at least have some foundation to work on here as well. The DynamoDB structure. Are you familiar with DynamoDB?
No.
Okay. So it's. Are you more familiar with SQL, or is there MongoDB, or do you have experience with key value stores or NoSQL?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So it should be very similar to that, and just a new API that you'll have to work with. I am liking, in terms of the interacting with DynamoDB from Node.js, I'm liking Jeremy Daly's Dynamodb Toolbox. It is written with single table design in mind, but we're not using that, and you don't need to use it. There isn't an NPM package that I love for Node.js and Dynamo. They all seem to fall short for me, but that one seems to be pretty good. But if you want to take a look around and suggest something else, feel free to do that. If you're interested in the GitHub Action workflows, you can check those out. Sorry, go ahead.
For the most part, the AppSync resolver should take care of talking to DynamoDB for you, right? Unless you're writing your custom Lambda, you wouldn't use your own Dynamo client.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Let's see. Is there anywhere that you feel I didn't cover? I know this was very, quick and high level, but was there anywhere? Let's see. Yeah, I think that's good for now. And if you have any questions or anything isn't clear, we can definitely follow up on that. And Uday, perhaps I'll help you out. Just directly, you and I can have a call and see if we can get past your issue. Or sorry, Nishant, we can get past your issue with the starting up the serverless framework there.